And then the environment is a big reason we care. And so a lot of our energy resources have enormous environmental and social consequences. And this is all along that supply chain, right? If we're looking at the whole system, all the way from extraction to end use, there are environmental impacts. And so we have land use impacts, just giving you some examples here. Land use, water, definitely fresh water can come into a concern. Air pollution and climate change. My background is actually in studying air pollution, so I could talk about air pollution as long as anybody wants. That's a big impact that we see on humans from our fossil fuel, in particular, resource use. Wildlife habitat impacts safety and accidents, annoyance, even in terms of visual impacts. And then they're not just immediate impacts, there are long-term impacts, intergenerational things like climate change, like nuclear waste, like extinction. Those are intergenerational challenges. And then equity in terms of environmental justice and who is bearing the environmental burden of the energy resource use. So we see a lot of challenges there. So I'm going to dig into air pollution. I said I have a background in air pollution. Growing up in Houston, air pollution is the air quality is pretty poor. A lot of days of ozone days where we had to stay inside, we couldn't play outside. A lot of asthma. I had a lot of asthma as a kid, so it was very present for me growing up. And it's very present for people around the world. So here I'm just showing you kind of some of the worst hotspots for air pollution on PM 2.5. PM 2.5 is the air pollutant that's the worst for human health. It's the really, really small particles. Um, that can get deep into our lungs. It can actually go into our bloodstream and it causes cardiovascular challenges. And so that's where it causes that premature mortality with that PM 2.5. So this is the worst air pollutant for people. You can talk about others like ozone and things like that, but PM 2.5 is the worst. You can see where some of these places are. Yeah, these are just the places that's worse. It's from a variety of different reasons. But usually that PM 2.5 is from burning things. So biomass, fossil fuels, wildfires, all of those things are going to have PM 2.5. It's not the things that typically are in like dust or something like that. There's a much larger particles that aren't as bad for our health. So these are reasons we care about energy as well as this human impact. Globally, we have 7 million of our fellow humans who are dying prematurely from air pollution. A lot of that is from that traditional biomass use. That's kind of the biggest piece of that. But there is also outdoor air pollution challenges that contribute to that. Even here in the United States, obviously a very developed country where we're not using traditional biomass, we have premature mortality for about 100,000 people. The estimates vary every year. And that air pollution is really from our transportation system primarily, some from our power production, but mostly from our transportation system. And that's because that is in our communities. So when we're driving our cars or our trucks, diesel trucks, whatever, those are in our communities. And that is where people live, and where they're most exposed to that air pollution. So I mentioned, there's equity challenges all over the world. We certainly see it here in the United States. So this is just a Harvard study found that in the United States, Black people are 3 times more likely to die from exposure to airborne pollutants than other groups. And this really has to do with socioeconomic and locational aspects of those communities. We have a history in the United States of things like redlining and where we put our transportation systems to divide up certain communities. And so we see that, for example, a lot of the Black communities would be found near highways, near waste disposal facilities, things like that. And so they bear a bigger burden of the pollution from our energy systems, while the wealthier populations are the ones that are benefiting from those services. And so this is part of that environmental justice and inequity that we see. Final note, because I do like to talk about air pollution, our exposure to air pollution makes us susceptible to other diseases. And so the other thing that we saw was those same communities were hit harder by COVID-19 because they had already had the degradation of their immune systems by that exposure to air pollution. So it makes people more susceptible to other challenges. And climate change. Obviously, the elephant in the room here. All of you are familiar with climate change, but just to hammer home the point that energy is really responsible of 3/4 of our greenhouse gas emissions. So this is one of the reasons we obviously care about our energy systems, where we're getting our energy from, and the energy services we're using it for that. And you know this, it's been the warmest year on record. We're just seeing it get warmer and warmer, and of course, all of the impacts related to that, whether it's heat, extreme heat, you know, movement of fresh water, that's going to affect our energy systems, hurricanes, wildfires, things like that. And we only have so much time to really transition to that clean energy future.